Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, America. I'm Janet West, and on behalf of Broadcast Beat, I'm delighted to welcome you to the first of the live streaming TV shows from the Teradek stand. We're going to have daily shows between 5 and 6 o'clock. That's 11 to 12 o'clock on the East Coast. Now, also during the show, Broadcast Beat will be having a radio broadcast. If you want to access it, go into tunein.com, select Broadcast Beat, and you can hear many of the IBC interviews from the folks at the show. Now, Broadcast Beat have just launched their digital magazine, and you can read it on http:// magazine.broadcastbeat.com. And the website also has links to watch this show every day. Now, over the next 4 days, we're going to look at some important topics. Starting today, we're going to have a look at 4K. Do we need it? What's it giving us? Tomorrow, we're going to have a look at broadcasting. Where's it going? How is the merge with the internet? Who's taking over, etc.? And on Sunday, we're going to have a look at post-production. Have we actually reached the efficiency and the workflows that we've been wanting to achieve for so many years? And then finally, on Monday, we'll be having a look at media asset management. Now, I've got a very impressive group of guests, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce them. From my right here, Peter Sykes. Peter and I work together at Sony, but Peter is Strategic Technology Development Manager. And he's been in the business quite a few years, like a lot of us have. And he first became involved in product management with Sony's high-definition television cameras. He's been involved in digital cinematography. He worked on the file-based HD technologies. And as Strategic Technology Manager, he's currently involved in introducing key technologies for ultra-high definition. Next to Peter is another Peter. Peter Yabsley, Professional Products Marketing Team Leader from the Professional Imaging Group from Canon. Peter was appointed this role within Canon Europe's Professional Imaging Group in November 2012. His principal role encompasses the development of marketing strategy across Canon's portfolio of professional imaging products. He's been with Canon for, I think it's 9 years, having originally joined the company in 2006. And then, if you've listened or tuned in on the internet to Bruce's shorts, you certainly are going to recognize Bruce Devlin. Bruce graduated from Queen's College, Cambridge, and has been working in the broadcast industry ever since. He's worked at the BBC and BBC R&D. He worked in France with Thompson's, and then became Chief Technology Officer after Snell with a company called Amberfin. Now, Amberfin has now been acquired by Dalit Digital Media Systems, and Bruce is Chief Media Scientist for Dalit. So, gentlemen, 4K's been around a little while. I can see it on a lot of the stands here. Can somebody clarify for me ultra-high definition versus 4K? Is it the same K? Because I thought ultra-high definition was 8K.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so there are various aspects to the nomenclature for 4K. 4K originally, as you know, came out of the cinema domain. And we worked together in the past on the introduction of that technology. So for 4K, you can consider that the 4096 by 2160, originally from the cinema area. We're using 4K also in Sony for 4K for kind of television land. So the raster of 3840 by 2160, what some people initially referred to as quad full HD. We're also using the 4K terminology to refer to that as well. So for Sony, we talk about 4K ultra high definition, and that's where we find the naming. But you are right. Ultra high definition covers the 4K, but also there's an 8K section of that as well, which we're involved with various organisations in looking at the longer term future as well. So 4K ultra high definition is how Sony tend to refer to what people are generally talking about as 4K.
Well, having myself been involved in high definition television development as we know it today, at the time it was supposed to be the really good technology. Is 4K just for manufacturers, Peter Yabsley, just so they can sell a few more boxes, or why do we really need it?
Well, I think there's a lot of different possibilities creatively you can get with 4K. Obviously, we started in the cinema with DCI 4K on the very big screens, and naturally more resolution is going to give you some benefit there. We've seen screen sizes get bigger and bigger in the home. I mean, at Canon, we're not a television manufacturer, but we're seeing that trend, and obviously with bigger screens, then having a higher resolution is going to give you some benefit. From the creative side, I think you've got more options there. We've seen, certainly from the point of view of the cameras, a lot of people shooting in 4K for HD applications, actually. So 4K acquisition for HD delivery gives you some more creative possibilities. Really kind of a mainstream everyday example is just interviewing. You can actually do certain situations with one camera and cropping in and different cutaways that would have previously taken two, and then you keep the same angle with the camera, this kind of thing. So actually I think there's a lot of potential there, and it certainly is opening some new doors for the way we can shoot when we look at sports as well. Something that's been investigated quite a lot recently in terms of 4K, the angles that you can get on the pitch and how you can reframe and crop into those on the fly are certainly interesting areas for 4K. So I think there's definitely something there for the consumer, but it's the usual story of right thing at the right time, and what really is offering some benefit there. I think there's more to it than just a badge.
Right. So you say it's offering more creative possibilities. Who's using it at the moment? Is it broadcasters? Is it the cinematographers?
We're seeing a move, certainly in the broadcast area. It's definitely started off with, I think, what you would broadly call more creative applications. So we've got the cinematic side, drama, commercials, yeah. Definitely picking up on that movement, but in association with a shift to more of the large sensor cameras, we're seeing definitely more 4K experimentation in the broadcast industry and the television industry, and that's reflected in the kind of lenses that we're bringing, that our customers are asking for, as well as the camera side of things, to match up the way people are shooting for broadcast, which actually can be quite different when you're talking about sports, OB, news, versus the drama side of things, for example, where you tend to have a bit more time and ability to manage the set. So that's, I think, certainly reflected in the way that the product mix is changing and how people are shooting as well.
So if we're looking at the use of 4K for cinematography, what advantage are cinematographers getting over, say, 24p, 25p production? Peter?
I think it goes back, if we go back to what cinematographers always wanted to do in the past. When we were active in launching high definition, the holy grail was to emulate film. So the cinematography or the cinematic industry was coming from a film heritage of 100 years or more, and the goal was always to try and emulate film. And in the high definition days, we approached the performance of film with the original Cine Alta 1080 24p system. I think what we've done now is we've reached a point where we can really have an alternative to film, which puts the creative power into the hands of the cinematographer, like they were shooting with film cameras. So the fact that we have higher resolution images, great color handling, high dynamic range, good latitude, all the things that cinematographers really want and were looking for, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we've now reached a position where we can put that into their hands. What that means is that a great cinematographer with a great camera can make a great picture. And it always goes back to who's actually going to consume and watch the content. So in a cinematography environment, it's the film goers. People are always looking at ways of engaging a film audience, creating something that's really spectacular to look at, whilst also having all the subtlety that film provides. And to do that in the digital domain really brings some real powerful opportunities. So it's been a long journey, and we've reached a stage now where we can really say that a camera, one of the cameras we can talk about, maybe the F65, is a really great camera for someone who's been used to shooting on film.
Peter, you wanted to add something?
I was going to say, I think that's an interesting point, because I think actually to some degree, fairly recently 4K has been used for a bit of a shorthand for actually some general developments that we've seen in camera and lens technology, where the development in resolution has actually gone hand in hand with a lot of other improvements that have been present in those tools, whether it's dynamic range, whether it's color sampling and color spaces, as well as the resolution. And I think that whole package has actually ended up offering more as a 4K product than perhaps just the resolution would imply. But it tends to be a kind of an easy way to talk about those developments, is to just talk about 4K as a general overview.
So have we got enough pixels now, or are we going to want to have a lot more pixels in the future?
I think one of the interesting things that you mentioned, Peter, was not just the 4K, but the HDR and possibly HFR, high frame rate. And I'm minded of an experiment that was done recently to say to a bunch of consumers, do you want more pixels or better pixels? Because you could imagine that you fill the pipe to the consumer either with lots and lots of pixels, or pixels that have more depth and more dynamic range about them, or maybe better frame rate. And the result in some ways concluded that consumers liked better pixels, and for some genres more pixels, better spatial resolution was a good thing. But for others, a higher dynamic range, so the blacks were blacker and the whites were lighter, and you had a much more immersive experience on the screen. That was better. Mm-hmm. But for yet other genres, having a higher frame rate to have immersive sports where the fluidity of motion was nicer. So for me, 4K means a number of things. It means not just the more pixels, but actually being able to manipulate those during the distribution chain to get them to the consumer for that more immersive, compulsive experience.
Right. Okay, so that's cinematography. Let's go to broadcasters. We've got a dilemma that broadcasters going out to the consumer, and not all the consumers have got TV sets that are 4K. So what's the advantage now of producing content in 4K, and are there many broadcasters doing so?
Well, I think what we've found over the past, let's put it into a timescale of about the last couple of years, we spend a lot of time with broadcasters who are evaluating the performance of the 4K systems. And they're doing that for a number of reasons. One is to provide a benefit for them for today, which is to engage with their audience, to differentiate their program from what everybody else is trying to offer. But also there is always an eye to tomorrow. And if we look at 4K today and draw the parallel with HD in the past, for a long time, we were looking at the situation where there wasn't a delivery mechanism to the home, but forward-thinking organizations started to produce in HD. When HD then became widespread, starting from the mid-2000s, they had a catalog of programming that could then be reversioned and sent out via the HD channel. And it's the same today in 4K. I think people are looking for that combination of what's great for today, how do we engage our audience today, but how do we lock value into the content that we're creating for whatever comes in terms of delivery and distribution in the future.
So a bit like we did with high definition, make the content and then gradually there's the platform on which to show the content.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, 4K resolution televisions are now widely available, and I believe some manufacturers are up to third generations of them. But is the extra resolution worth it for the consumer? And in some cases, I don't think it is, or do you?
I think if we look at the reaction of consumers generally when they see the pictures, I mean, I always remember the first time I saw a 4K image on an 84-inch screen, and for me, I've been in the industry quite a long time, and it takes quite a bit to surprise me. But I did get the wow from the pictures, and I think if you look in anywhere where the pictures are being shown, if you go into a high street television store and the screens are there, people do generally look at them and think that's quite incredible.
Okay. So
that reaction is then what the content creators are looking to sustain. So I read an article recently that said that it was a televisual magazine survey in the UK that polled a number of content creators, and 33% of them said that they were looking to shoot in 4K within the next 12 months. So that, I think, kind of emphasizes the consumers are reacting and looking at the pictures and being impressed, and that is going to create a requirement to create content to fill the screens.
But I think maybe to Bruce's point, the benefits to the consumer maybe is going to depend on the content, and there will be some kind of content that really can make the most of having that extra resolution. I mean, sports is something that still there's a lot of work going on, but you can see where there might be an immediate benefit there. We talk to a lot of cinematographers who have a reluctance actually to work at a higher resolution, and they are more concerned about other factors, whether it be dynamic range or all kinds of things, because creatively they're not necessarily looking for more sharpness, and they're delivering a benefit to the consumer in a different way. So I think there definitely is a benefit to 4K, but maybe content is one of those things that will determine how much and where it's really relevant to the people in their living room at home.
Right. Peter mentioned an article that's been written. There are lots of articles on 4K in Broadcast Beat, and don't forget, if you're watching this program now, do get your friends to look at the magazine Broadcast Beat. Just Google it and you will find the link, and it will give you the link to watch this show. So please spread the word. It's not only available on the streaming here, but also on the podcast from tunein.com.
And in fact, if you're watching it on your smart television, you could zoom up on your 4K set, the web page, and minimize us to the top right-hand corner and follow along as you're going. Good advantage of a 4K set.
Okay, thank you.
If anybody does that, send me your email address, because I'd love to see that actually working.
Thanks for that, Bruce. When high-definition television came out, it was the first video system that had other markets. We looked at the medical market, etc. With the resolution of 4K, do you see that going into new markets?
Absolutely, yes. I think what we're seeing is that a great image in one market really translates into a great image in other markets as well. So we are seeing developments. Sony, in the professional space, we deal with a lot of kind of non-broadcast organizations, medical, healthcare, automotive design, theaters, etc. And I think there are benefits across many different markets. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a similar situation for us at Canon, having the broader portfolio and those technologies transfer and translate. Talking about theatres, whether we class it as broadcast, I don't know, but certainly we have a lot of conversation. We see quite an enthusiastic take up in live event production, whether it's opera, whether it's theatre, whether it's outdoor events, especially when those are broadcast in cinemas or on big screens. There's an enthusiasm there to have more resolution, have more detail, which is obviously helps the experience when it's a very large reproduction with a big audience. So that's definitely obviously related to broadcast, but it's quite an area. There's a lot of interest for us.
And it gets used a lot at the big shows and concerts and music festivals, certainly in the UK. Which brings me to the point, it's good to have it on a big screen, but if you're several hundred meters back from the screen, are you actually seeing 4K resolution?
Well, I think in the end, if you've got more detail in the picture and you're able to make more out wherever you're standing,
right,
then there's going to be a benefit for you as the customer. Realistically, if you're 700 meters away with the same size screen, what would you rather be looking at, HD or 4K? Well, maybe that again depends on the content, but arguably that extra resolution is going to help you no matter what's happening. So I think, there's definitely going to be a benefit there for those big spaces.
Have we got all the equipment down the value chain for 4K? We've got cameras, we've got lenses, servers that can cope. Is there something missing, or have we got the complete chain now?
Well, for us, Bruce, I was just going to say, for us, it really, I think, depends where you look and what your applications are.
Right.
We started off with our first 4K products very much positioned more in the cinema or dramatic space, manual cinema lenses, the EOS C500. The newest lens that we've brought in, which is 4K capable, is actually much more designed for broadcast and television style shooting. It has a servo unit. It's very mobile, can be shoulder mounted. It can be used in an OB RGB configuration, and that's a new step for us. It was something that the market and our customers were asking for. So I think maybe it depends where you look and what kind of content you're shooting and what environments you're working in from the acquisition side, whether everything's there. And then of course further down the chain you may have differences depending on your requirement. So I think the solution's building, but maybe not at a uniform pace so far.
I think that's where it becomes very interesting, particularly further down the chain beyond acquisition, where you've maybe done an ingest, you've done some sort of color correction, you've done your basic NLE edit, and then you have to get it out to everybody else from that point onwards. For the HD world, we're in a world where a standard Windows or Linux-based server can probably process 4 files in about real time per server. You can't do 4 4Ks on one software server. You're now at the point where that server is struggling to keep up with real time. So actually suddenly you need a lot more servers to do your transcode for the equivalent duration of 4K. If you then want to get it back onto an SDI cable, well actually it's not one SDI cable now, it's some SDI cables required. And instead of having 128 square router, you're struggling to find something that's going to route all of those things synchronously and recombine them back. So actually, the further downstream you get, the more comfortable people have become with HD and software solutions for actually not having to go back into baseband anymore. And as soon as you start looking at 4K, suddenly the hardware reappears again and you've got to go back to old style, maybe working techniques, just to try and get the fluidity in the live, because you're pushing the edges of today's servers so much harder than you do with HD. So does it exist? Yes. Is it pretty? Not very at the moment, but I'm sure Moore's Law will take care of that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of development. If you look at IBC is always a great time to look at the current status at any particular one time. The things that have happened over the past couple of years. So last year we came here and we were looking to try and do something spectacular with 4K. So we teamed up with a number of companies to bring the world's first multi-camera 60p live international broadcast from the UK. It was a rugby game in the UK that we brought into the show here at IBC. So we provided some of the equipment for that on the acquisition side, the production side. We took some of our cinema cameras, which we were then had an adapter which fits on the back to interface to a kind of outside broadcast environment. And there were three or four cameras. We had a switcher in 4K, and then at that point we handed over the signal to an encoding company who they use encoding to and distributed the signal into here, and then when it was decoded it was handed back to us and we displayed it. So that was the first time that we were able to show a live international broadcast. And then in the summertime we took that one stage further, because we went to the World Cup and we screened 2 matches from the FIFA World Cup in 4K live into a cinema in London, which again was a technical challenge. It was interesting, but we found that by partnering with companies that are in other parts of the chain where we're maybe not so active, we can bring a really compelling experience. And going back to the consumer, what we found when people went into the cinema and watched the live football, the final, the reaction on the way out, we interviewed people on the way out, members of the public who were present, and their reaction was quite something. It was a big screen experience. Most of them were British, so they had no interest in basically what the result was, although the game was quite good. But they
won't go there, Peter.
They really did. They found it an immersive thing. It was a wow experience, and it shows just how far technology is coming in a relatively short period of time.
Okay. What about 4K and gaming? Does it offer advantages there?
Not something that we're directly involved in as a company.
Okay.
I would suspect it will do in that sense of detail and resolution and immersion. Again, I mean, one of the things we do see with the 4K content that's getting made, and one of the perceptions that people have, is that detail gives depth or a feeling of depth, which, of course, practically it's no different. It's two-dimensional, but it gives that sense. And I could imagine that perhaps for gaming environments that's going to be something that's a beneficial experience as well for people. But yeah, not something we're directly involved in.
Yeah.
Certainly know I'd see a lot less of my teenagers if they had 4K gaming in their rooms with 22.2 sound or whatever it is that gives the true emotion. That might be a good thing, who knows?
Bruce, another format, another system on top of all the other systems, and obviously with the work that you've been doing, you're involved in, you know, putting this in and getting that out, whatever.
So I just have to correct you there, Janet. You said more formats and more systems, plural. You were too optimistic with the singular there, I'm afraid.
Okay, but where do you see perhaps some of the issues in post-production?
Yeah, I think it comes down to we do have a plethora of file formats and color formats and compression styles and container formats in the industry, and I joke that, you know, that my company Amberfin sold transcoders and still sells transcoders, and when the transcoder vendors are saying there are too many formats, you know the industry's got a bit of a problem. And seeing 4K come in and seeing slightly different variations on codecs coming from the acquisition codecs within the cameras, and then seeing contribution codecs again using slightly different styles of compression to the styles that we used in HD, and then looking at the distribution codecs, which surprisingly are much more homogeneous in style. It does look like they're in the middle of this. You know, we've acquired some content and we're going to make some content. There are still a huge number of different variations which don't actually add much value to the overall industry. So I see people doing different variations on AVC, different variations on, or proposing different variations on HEVC, proposing J2K, proposing different styles of uncompressed, sometimes working in a broad color range, sometimes working in a raw color range, sometimes working in a constrained color range. And there are very good technical reasons why any individual would want to make that particular set of choices. But as soon as you zoom back and say, well, to get from your preferred range of colors, Mr. Person using the camera, to that person in post using their particular post facility's choice of colors and styles and compression, to then going to that other post house and then going to that distribution chain, you discover that you've reintroduced the let's transcode it 12 times. And all the gains that each individual format had are being lost because you're cascading different compression types, different color transform techniques, and different sort of styles of compression just to get through the chain.
So what's the solution?
Well, in HD, the UK broadcasters, manufacturers, post houses all got together and came up with a proposal called the UK Digital Production Partnership, digitalproductionpartnership.co.uk, and they're going to be making some special announcements tomorrow, Saturday, at IBC about how they've got together the vendor community, the production community, the post-production community, and the broadcasters who are consuming all the content to basically agree on one style of one codec in one color range with one style of metadata where everybody can transact the content using this one format. And it's the first time this has happened on a geographic scale rather than just a single facility house or even a single broadcaster scale. And it's really important because as well as defining what the formats are, they've also put in place a certification procedure. And I know that anybody who works in post and has received a file from someone that they've never received a file from before, yes, it might have been from the same camera that they've used before, but if it's been through that piece of equipment or that transcoder or that color corrector, there's a good chance that it's not quite right, and you get rejects and failures when that file arrives. And what the DPPs try to do is, at least for HD and SD interchange, to have one format that you're pretty confident is going to work. So instead of 10 companies having 10 formats of their own and all trying to get all the different combinations to work, you've got one. So my gut feeling is that as we move towards a 4K, high dynamic range, high frame rate future, whatever that's going to look like, that a similar sort of impetus needs to take place, because otherwise there's a lot of engineering going to be done by a lot of companies just to make person A's flavor work with person B's flavor for very little overall end-to-end gain. Mm-hmm. That's my soapbox. I'll sit down now and let somebody else say, you're wrong, Bruce.
No? Okay. If we look at the various formats that we've gone through, each time we're coming up with something new. And this industry is very exciting. I mean, we can just see by the enthusiasm here as people come into IBC every year. and Broadcast Beat writes about all the different toys and bells and whistles, etc. But we have one issue, and that is we're competing with an environment that's suffering. Have you, in your development, both Canon and Sony, taken the environment into consideration in developing the cameras? And if so, what sort of things have you been looking at? Has it been materials? Has it been energy efficiency? Peter?
Well, I think the answer is yes, absolutely. Across the whole of our product range, Sony has a strategy of reducing our environmental footprint, and that's widely been publicized in via our websites, etc. what we're doing. Just to pick up on maybe a couple of small points, what we try and do, we take a camera design, for example. We're always looking at more efficient ways of recording the data, so we're using efficient compression techniques to reduce data rate whilst maintaining quality. Any reduction in data rate obviously is something that's going to be could feed through into an environmental message. We're looking at manufacturing using recyclable materials. We launched FS7 today, a new camera, magnesium body, so that's excellent for recycling. And also looking at media. So we, for a long time, Sony was manufacturing tape. We have lots of tapes in archives, and we're looking at how to migrate those through onto something like an optical disc media, which will require less in terms of air conditioning, all the knock-on
fewer mechanical moving parts.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's central to our design philosophy, both in the professional but also across consumer, mobile, everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Peter?
we're probably all going to sit and be in agreement about our corporate approaches, but it's absolutely the same for Canon. We are, as a global organisation, very focused on our impact on the environment and how we can minimise it when we're making very technological products. Even when if you look at things like our broadcast lenses, particularly for the audience at IBC, the elimination of leaded glass and various other toxins through those lenses has even resulted in us being unable to produce some of the products that previously we used to do, and we've taken that decision because we feel it's the best direction for everybody involved. So yeah, it's absolutely something that's core and central to what we do as an organisation.
So are you looking in the future with, say, cameras, for example, whereby instead of changing the camera, you may be changing some components within the camera as a way of saving materials and resources?
It can be an option. I mean, we have examples on the stand here where we've got cameras where we're adding functionality to specific cameras. But we're open to any, looking at all different kinds of avenues to develop in that respect. So,
but I think this is, I mean, if I can pick up on the same point, we're taking a similar approach, and we're now regularly trying to offer our customers additional features or more value, or when we bring something new, trying to provide that to the customers that have already purchased the product. And obviously, there's a customer satisfaction part in that for us, but actually there is a question about turnaround of equipment and how quickly that can happen these days. And if we're able to provide our customers with more longevity and more satisfaction at the same time, then I think that's going to be good for everyone. So
I think that concept's kind of foreign to this industry about longevity of products, but I think certainly it's something we have to think about in the future. Bruce, I know you have particular interests in the environment. Where do you think the changes have to be made in 4K? To whether it's, I don't know, is it going to be reducing the energy to move the larger number of pixels down a data pipe? Or
I'd love to think there was a way of reducing the amount of energy to push the pixels down the data pipe, but I think for 4K it's going in the other direction.
Yeah.
I've done some comparisons between, for example, some dedicated image processing that we used to do in hardware versus doing the same thing in software. And if you just look at the energy consumption of the two devices, the software typically takes 2 or 3 times more energy just because you're working on a slightly less efficient CPU platform, you're putting more electricity in to run this processor and its associated devices, and you're putting more electricity in to get the heat out, and then there's the air conditioning plant around the data center to get it out. So actually you're energy less efficient by doing it in software. But because of the economics of software, actually overall for the end user, the broadcaster or the facility house, it's actually cheaper to own the less energy efficient solution. Then if I look at today's norm, which is HD broadcasting using the H.264 codec, and then I look at 4K, which probably has 5 times the pixel density, whether or not you've actually got the spatial resolution or the more dynamic range or the more frames, it's pretty much 5 times the pixel density. And the best codec that's going to be able to cope with that, which is HEVC, at about 300% more computation than AVC. So that's 15 times more energy per pixel, give or take, grosso modo, for 4K delivered down an internet pipe to a consumer than the equivalent energy per pixel for HD. But it's still economically viable to do that because the cost of the energy and the cost of the end-to-end isn't really borne out by the people who have to put up with the, stuff falling on their trees and their forests falling down. So the
as long
energy
as we've got
equation
the
doesn't
energy,
really work.
it's going to carry on. But it's when energy security perhaps becomes an issue that we have to think
Indeed,
differently.
It is very much an energy pricing, energy security kind of question because at the moment it's a very easy slope to go into 4K and do the software processing to get the stuff out there. The economics are still good for the next foreseeable future. But whether it's good for our grandchildren, who knows?
Yeah, interesting point. How long's 4K going to be around before we start seeing 8K?
Well, I think...
or are we getting our crystal ball out at this point?
I think if you look at the, everything is evolving over time. How long is HD going to be around? A long time.
Yes.
Exactly.
People are, companies, some of them have invested in HD for many years and some of them relatively recently. So all of these things I think will evolve over time. I think 4K will be here for a long time. It's in the cinema domain it's been there for some time, and I think in the broadcast domain it's coming. Trials are happening. First services have been announced. People like Netflix, and in Japan we have the Next TV Forum who are broadcasting pictures. So first services have happened, but you're right, it's going to be here for some time.
But it's actually an interesting question that comes up for us as Canon very much from a lens point of view, because naturally the investment in lenses is very, very large, and historically they have a lot of longevity as a product. You get a lot of return on investment in those lenses, and the pace of change in the broadcast industry is accelerating and has accelerated versus previous couple of decades. We do have questions from our customers, and we do have these discussions about what the next step should be and what is the most economically viable solution to invest more in 4K equipment now, or to stick with HD and see how long we can go, knowing that in Japan particularly there is already some commitment towards 8K, and I think what we might see maybe that we've just got more choice for both consumers and content producers and distributors. There'll be more suitable places for 8K perhaps than in the home. I think it's not clear whether that's even going to be a relevant proposition. And the same thing that we've already talked about with 4K in terms of just what the content is and how people are consuming it. HD is definitely going to be around for some considerable time, and that's reflected in what really the mainstream of people are still shooting and the content they're providing to their customers, whoever they may be, whether it's us at home in our living room or whether it's the small company down the road who needs a web video. So things will move, but I think there's going to be a lot of scope and opportunity for those existing formats to continue, and for people to feel secure that the equipment they're investing in is going to have some kind of future and longevity, despite the news and the hype and all the new products that we're all bringing as manufacturers.
Yeah.
I think your point about flexibility is really key, because when HD replaced SD, you still had to build a broadcasting plant or a facility to get the signal to the consumer. Whereas today, there are perfectly viable existing signal chains between my iPhone and a digital 4K cinema projector with existing kit. We don't have to build anything new. All the tools exist today. We can also take either of your 4K cameras and get it onto my iPhone with existing tools that exist today. So really, I think what we're doing is we're creating more versatility for the creatives to shoot in the format that's right for their creative production, and for the consumers to consume it in the way that they want. And the bits in the middle, nearly all the tools exist, and what we're trying to figure out is how to do it economically viably to get the stuff that was shot in the creative way that the creatives wanted it into the fashion the consumers want to consume it without it breaking the bank in the middle. Because it still costs money to get it from A to B, and if you're not making money in the middle, you've not got broadcasting or film or anything anymore. And that's the clever bit, is how do we make the middle cheaper and cheaper and cheaper year after year, yet still maintain the quality that you guys bring at the front end, and those big flat things that my wife wants to buy at the back end.
Peter, you mentioned HD is going to be around for a while. So, and Bruce, you've touched on the cost at the consumer end. I just want to touch on the cost on the content creation end. If HD is going to be around for a while, let's assume then you've got some kit which is going to do a lot of work and finally it needs replacing. Are companies, broadcasters, various companies required to think of a much higher investment, capital investment, to get into 4K, or is it very similar to HD as we know today?
Well, I think there's maybe two aspects to that. The first is that a few years ago we were really only having a conversation really at the high end, the cinematic end. And what we found, what's happened over the last couple of years, is that's now really become widespread. So, we are supplying 4K cameras for basically any budget, whether that's a consumer, a standalone videographer in the professional space, through a broadcast up to cinematography. So there is a much wider choice of technology that's available. A lot of that is 4K HD switchable. And as we found in the HD era, when HD first came around, the cameras that were used for HD shooting were really giving great performance for content creators that were distributing via standard definition. So today, if you use a 4K camera, you can get great HD pictures from the super sampling of the sensor technology. So more and more, we're very much aware that everybody's on a step-by-step journey. It's very rarely that someone comes along and says, I've got a completely blank sheet of paper, I'm going to start with a new service. It doesn't happen very often. So for us, it's a step-by-step process. Create 4K cameras, make them HD compatible as well, create systems that you can use the cameras maybe in a live environment with two cameras together, where we can stitch the output of two 4K cameras, and then we can have HD cut out from various parts of the picture that then adds something else to an HD production. So for us, we're very conscious it's a step-by-step process, and that's what we try and build into the products that we design.
Okay, Peter?
I think, again, similar philosophy, but I think it's very much dependent on the context of where you sit in terms of production, whether you are a big international broadcaster, whether you're a small production company. To both Peter and Bruce's point, in terms of what is your customer prepared to accept and pay for now, and how can you make money from it, but also looking ahead and saying, well, if I make this investment, does this generate me revenue and make me money in future? And for some people the answer will be yes, and for other people the answer will be, actually right now it's more economical for me to go with an HD product and stick with it and have that as my production in the short to medium term, and then graduate to the next level when my customers and the market are more mature. And I think because we're still talking relatively early technology, relatively early developments, there are a lot of different situations out there depending on where you stand, what kind of content you're producing, and who your customer is.
Right. So, for all the people coming to IBC, what can they expect to see that's new in 4K at the show? Peter?
Well, for us, I guess you might say the biggest 4K tool is centered around lens. Again, as I've mentioned, is our new Cine Servo lens. We actually announced it at NAB this year, but it's the first time we've been able to show it off, to a wide European audience.
Physically got it,
exactly,
yes.
And of course that's the key thing. So we've got a few of those lenses on our stand in different configurations, studio setup and more manual setups, and people can come and touch and try that. And that kind of crosses over for us because it's a 4K lens, and a lot of the investigation and production that's happening with those cine style lenses is 4K, but it's also related to the fact that they're using large sensor cameras. And similar to the camera story, of course that lens is going to give you fabulous quality and fabulous images if you're shooting in 2K or HD as well. but it's there and it's designed for those people within the broadcast industry who are starting to look at 4K and thinking, I have a narrative, this is the way we've developed that we know is effective when we shoot this kind of content. What tools do I have to help me do that? And that's the newest thing from our side.
Peter, what's new for Sony at the show?
Quite a lot, actually. We've got new cameras.
No, 4K, yeah.
4K. So we've got new cameras. We've got a great new compact camera that's 4K ready, the PXW X70. We've got the new FS7 4K camera, which is creating a lot of excitement. We're showing a new OLED 4K monitor for the first time, BVM X300, which if you have a chance, it's really quite something.
Yeah.
We're showing 4K transmission over an IP link, so our IP live system. We have a live link over IP between BCE, based in Luxembourg, and the RAI Centre here onto our stand. That's something new. We're showing our picture stitching technology, and we're showing an application where we have two F-65s, which we've managed to shoot some great content from things like the Red Bull Air Race that we're stitching together, and we're showing on a 12K by 2K huge display on the stand. So there's something for the entry level, something for the broadcaster, something for outside broadcast, and something for hopefully most of the people that come onto the booth.
And I'm sure you, Bruce, in your next Bruce's Shorts, is going to be telling people how to cope with some of the problems in dealing with 4K.
Opportunities, they're all opportunities, Janet.
Right, okay. Well, this has been a very interesting discussion. I'd really like to thank Broadcast Beat for allowing us to have this discussion on 4K. And my guests here, Bruce Devlin, Peter Yabsley, Peter Sykes, and thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a really good discussion.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Peter?
So if you'd like to watch us again tomorrow, as I mentioned, tomorrow you can hear some interesting speakers talking about broadcasting, where it's going, what's changing. We've touched on it a bit today, but tomorrow, and then Sunday is post-production, and Monday is media asset management. I'm Janet West, and on behalf of Broadcast Beat, I'd like to thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.